You know, it's hard to tell how old people are now. Amen. Y'all just look so good. And I was talking to a couple of friends of mine. I was at a banquet. I was preaching a banquet for a friend of mine, his anniversary banquet, and another one of our friends was there, and I asked him, I said, man, why is it that I'm younger than both of y'all, and my hair is gray, and y'all's hair is coal black? And my friend said this, and he's going to have to answer for this in judgment. He said, when I was young, I used to dye my hair gray so that I could get respect. He said, now that I'm old, I'm just going to let the black grow out. Amen and amen. I'm excited. I get to preach to you again about giving. These months as we prepare to make our budget in October, I want to talk to you about giving. And at the conclusion of this month, I'll resume my series in the book of Philippians. Amen. Amen. I'm going to see who can shout on giving. Thank you, ushers, for your presence. You may be seated. So, y'all know I like to eat, and Brother Lloyd was talking about, the Lord is good because he hadn't missed a meal. The Lord been real good to me. Amen. That's all I'm saying. So I go to this soul food restaurant called Miss Mary's over on Hebron. And y'all, they are so nice. They bring me this thing, and LaTonda, I know I'm going to be in trouble about eating all this. But they let me order whatever I want. And they got this half tea, half lemonade in there. And y'all, you can tell when you're eating, it's going to be some consequences down the road. It's just one of them, ooh, this is so good, it's got to be some diabetes in my future, that kind of stuff. It's got to be. And y'all, they just, whatever I wanted, they treated me like a star. Even dessert, what would you like? And then, before we left the table, before we left the room, they said, now, concerning the collection. I love golf, those of you know, and my favorite golf place is Lou's Golf, and I love to go to Lou's Golf. I go there, and you can trade in and make, and I go so much when I walk in, y'all, literally, I answer the phone if somebody calls. Kevin, who is there, Llewellyn, who leads the place, and I go, I take down clubs. He lets me trade in clubs. He lets me touch, swing, go in the back, whatever club I want. But before I walk out the store, he says, now, concerning the collection. There's one place I get my cars worked on, Quick Car Vista Ridge, and the guy there is so nice, some guy named Bowens. He is always so nice to me. He'll literally come, whatever I need, he fixes up my car, and before I leave, he grins, goes to the cash register, and says, now concerning the collection. I love eBay. I'm addicted to eBay. Please don't tell my wife. And eBay lets me pick whatever I want. I can put it in my shopping cart, but it doesn't get to my house until they take the collection. And I don't care where you shop, if you are Big Lots or Burlington's or Nordstrom's and Neiman's, before you leave, you've got to deal with the collection. My heart for our church, my desire for our church is to, on one side, to have a place that I call Westside's Future, where our children and our youth don't have to be in the fellowship hall or in the choir room having to overhear us, but they will have a worship center designed for children and youth and an activity room. In my mind, I can already see it back over here in this corner, and that's Westside Future. But on this side, I see Westside Fellowship, where we have a full banquet hall, and we don't have to go across the street to have major church fellowships. And when we get ready to have something after church, we don't have to interfere with children's church because we've got a fully equipped industrial-sized kitchen and fellowship hall right back here. I see us having a Christian ed. I see us having a minister maybe to men and a minister to women and one to senior adults. I see us having a full staff that wherever there is a ministry need, we have it. I see our daycare and our academy being first class, second to none, so that people are on a waiting list to get in. I see us having a school, since they start building prisons when our kids are tested in third grade. I see us having a school for young boys where we get them before they get to the third grade. So when they test these, they won't build prisons, but they'll start building more colleges. And I'm excited about it, but now, concerning the collection. That's what Paul says in 1 Corinthians, the 16th chapter. In 1 Corinthians, the 16th chapter, verses 1 and 2. Now concerning the collection for the saints, as I have given order to the churches of Galatia, so do you also. On the first day of the week, let each of you lay something aside, storing up as he may prosper, that there be no collections when I come. And let me just read verses 3 and 4. And when I come, whomever you approve by your letters, I will send to bear your gift to Jerusalem. But if it is fitting that I go also, they will go with me. The grass withers, the flowers thereof fadeth away, but the word of our God shall stand forever. I want to talk about now concerning the collection. Now concerning the collection. You know what's exciting is that Paul is clear when he gives these instructions on how Christian giving is an essential part of Christian living. Because any Christian who hasn't gotten this giving thing down doesn't appreciate all that they have as a Christian. Because the whole idea of Christianity is built around this thing that God so loved us that on the morning of creation, God gave up being everything that we might become something. And on the morning of redemption, when he gives his son, God so loved us that he gives to us his only begotten son. And that son so loved the Father and loved us that he gave his life. And if you hadn't gotten that, if you don't understand giving, you will never be the Christian that you could be. Preach, Delvin, Atchison. I am. And what's interesting in this text is that Paul concludes chapter 15 with some stuff that we can't pay for even if we try. When you read chapter 15, it's that passage that says, now, he says, behold, we shall not all sleep. I'm going to show you a mystery. And Paul shows us a mystery, but it ain't no secret. That's a shout right there. He said, it's a mystery, but it ain't no secret. Because here's what's going to happen. He says, we are going to be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye. The trump of God shall sound, and the dead in Christ are going to be raised, and we're going to be incorruptible. And he says, therefore, be steadfast and unmovable. Here it is. Here is the shout in this text already before I get to it, where he says that God has already secured us the ultimate victory. We have already won. We are not trying to win. We have won. In the end, we have already decided that we are going to be victorious, and you can't pay for that. But let me tell you what you can use your gifts for. He says three things about Christian giving. I'm going to share them with you. I'm going to holler a couple of times, and then I'm going to take my seat. Would you like to hear it? I'm glad that you do. The first thing that he says about Christian giving is that Christian giving should be purposed. It has a purpose. Watch what he says in the text. There's a famine going on, and they're giving money to meet the needs of the famine. He says, as I have given instructions to the church in Galatia, this is what you do. That they are doing two things. Here it is. Here is why they give. They give, first of all, to alleviate misery. Because there's some folk in the famine. So he wants to rescue them from the famine. But secondly, they give to elevate ministry or to raise the fellowship. I'm preaching, y'all. Yeah. So he says when you give, your gift helps to alleviate the misery, but it also helps to elevate ministry. The reality is that the purpose of giving here, when you give to this church, you give with the understanding that we are meeting the needs of ministry, that there are people who have needs, and the kind of gift you give will reflect the kind of ministry you want to receive. That if you really want ministry at A class, you can't give D class money. Preach, Delvin, Atchison. I am. Maybe if I start walking, y'all would be feeling me a little better. One of the members, I was having a conversation with one of the members, and one of the members said to me, he said, now, Pastor, I'm having a meeting with one of these brothers. He said, see, one of these brothers, one of his customers, I'm negotiating $1 million, some of these $1 million contracts. He says, now, if I'm negotiating $1 million contract, I don't take a fella to Whataburgers. And the devil in hell knows I love Whataburgers. Don't get me wrong. It's my one. It's my go-to. But if I'm negotiating $1 million contract, I think I might spring for Perry's or Ocean Air. Somebody gonna help me. Ruth Chris, you might get some Del Frisco's or some Three Forks if it's $1 million contract. Well, why is it that we want Del Frisco ministry, but we want to give Jack in the Box money? And the truth of the matter is that if we as a church want excellence in ministry, then we need to understand that we're giving. And you are giving to a church that has a record of being responsible stewards, where every gift you give is accounted for. Well, all you got to do is come to any meeting that we have and say that I want to see the records of what we've been giving. When you give with purpose. It is not so that just so we can have a beautiful building. It's so that when families are in need, we are ministering to them. It's so that when you come, we have excellence. It's so that our Sunday school teachers are trained so that they're not teaching what they feel. They're teaching what the Word of God says. It's so our staff can have the best tools in ministry so that when they serve, we don't have to take a back seat to anywhere. It's so that the pastor will reflect what the church looks like. You can't have a first-class church and then want a third-class pastor. We ought to look like we belong to each other so that every time I go somewhere, when somebody says, we're getting ready, right now, we're getting ready to do an offering in October here at the church. We're going to do an offering for the Bahamas, how they've been hit. And I'm in the convention. When I stand at the convention, I want to stand like I represent a church that looks like you look. I wish I had somebody help me in here. And let me tell you, the amazing thing about God is God has a way of blessing gifts when you are sincere in giving. And you don't ever have to be embarrassed by you giving your best. Years ago, I was pastoring Crockett, and Brenda and I had just moved there, and a lady came, and the church gave us a loan to pay as a down payment for our house, with the understanding that once we would have the anniversary, we'd get the money back. And one of the ladies at the church said to me, she said, Pastor, the Lord laid you on my heart. And I don't think I've ever told this story publicly. She said, is it okay tomorrow at your anniversary if I were to give you and Sister Atchison $10,000? And that's been 15 years. I've never told that story publicly. Let me tell you the story that I tell. Not that I wasn't impactful. I was grateful. You know the story that I tell? The story I tell, When I graduated from high school in 1983, my sister Karen my sister Karen went to school in Prairie View. She and a girl named Palace K. Rick went to Prairie View. They would come home on the weekends, and they would wait tables at the country kitchen. I graduated. Palace K, I had gone out to see Karen. Palace K came outside and said to me, she said, you know when you're from the country, y'all know about playing dozens where you call people by their mama and daddy's name. She called me Buddy. That was my daddy's name. She said, Buddy, I think God has some great things for you. She went in her apron where she kept her tips, and gave me $5. It impacted me more than the 10,000. Because a college student who was willing to sacrifice almost 40 years later, 35 years later, I'm still touched by her making that sacrifice. You don't have to be able to give what somebody else gives, but when you give the Lord your best, and people love to say that at church all they do is ask for money. That's what they want. They got that. Listen, the truth of the matter is that's not all that we want. I've been here a year and a half, and I've just started talking about money, but I don't let people make me feel embarrassed about talking about money. You don't invite a plumber to your house, and when he gets ready to leave, he gives you the bill. You say, every time you come over here to fix something, you give me a bill. You don't go to the doctor, and after he gets through, there y'all go again. Y'all do medicine and every time you don't go to the lawyer, and after they leave the court, oh, you call yourself a lawyer and you charging people for law? Y'all ain't gonna help me this morning. So he says this, he says, giving should be purposed, but he also says that giving should be planned. I'm not making it up, it's right in the text. He has a specific period, he has specific participants, and he has specific place. It's in the text. Here's the thing about giving, that when you give, a lot of us just when we get to church and whatever we got in our purse or in our wallets, we just give that, and that's okay. And that's all right if that's the kind of God you got. Right? But I got a God that just doesn't show up when I show up at his house. He comes by my house, so I make up in my mind, I've decided what I'm going to give to him, because I believe if your house note is important enough to budget, if your car note is important enough to budget, if your education is important enough to budget, then what you give to the Lord ought to be a part of your budget. Because you don't have a that'll-do God. You don't have a that'll-do God. You know what that'll do is, when somebody this and whatever they got, oh, that'll do. That'll do. That'll do. No, we don't have a that'll do God. I just refuse to believe that on creation, God just said that'll do. When I see the sun, I think the Lord gave me his best. When I see the stars and the moon as they stand silent sentinels in the evening sky, I say God gave me his best. When I see the beauty of a rose or watch a rose blush because it can't be more beautiful, I say God gave me his best. And since God gave me his best, when I look at Calvary, I got to say God gave me his best. And if God gave me his best, I'm not going to give God seconds. And I don't care what anybody else has said. I've heard people say, well, you know, that there are people who say, well, you know, if your light bill is due and your tithes are due, you got to pay your light bill. Let me be honest with you. Most of us have enough. Our problem is that we don't have enough resources. It's that we're not responsible enough stewards, that we don't plan well. Come on, talk to me. That you can't make $1,000 a week and live at $1,500. It's going to catch up with you. Oh, come on, talk to me now. And here is what I believe. And I learned this from an old lady. Sister Groves taught me this. Sister Groves' husband had been a pastor in the city, and he had died Sister Rose was sick, and me and a friend, Anthony Rayford, who was her deacon, went by she had called for them to come get her tithes, her church dues, her tithes. We go over, and Anthony said to Sister Groves, you've been sick. You don't have to pay your money to the church. She said, baby, I've been sick, but TXU Electric, that's the light company. She said, the light company want their money. She said, the cable people want their money. She said, the whole time I've been sick, Southwestern Bell ain't told me I ain't got to pay my phone bill. Now here is the shout. She said, the Lord gave me the money to pay all them. You think I'm going to cheat him? When folk get sick or when folk go through affliction and the first thing you cut out is what you're giving to the Lord, it says to me something about your faith. I just believe if you will trust God when you're going through, he will carry you through. Now, I may be the only one here, but I wish I had some folk in here who will testify that when you're going through, the Lord will still get you through. Y'all ain't going to help me today. That you ought to plan, as a matter of fact, to help us budget better for this congregation. What you can do is, if you are a member, you have a portal, and where you give, you can keep a record of everything you can give. And what I have done is I have pledged to the church, because I know what I'm going to make next year. I already know, unless the Lord moves on your heart in a mighty way. I have a general idea about what I'm going to make and what Sister Atchison. So what we have done is, because we know what our tithes are going to be next year, I've gone to my portal, and on every membership portal, there is a place where you can go and you can pledge to give however you give. If you give monthly, if you give bi-weekly, if you give every week, however, if you give annually, you can say, this is my pledge. And as you give, it will show you how you're making progress. Because I think you ought to pledge. You ought to plan. I think you ought to budget what you're going to give to the church. I think God deserves that. Now, having said that, I do know that sometimes the Lord will move on you, and you'll give what you hadn't planned on giving. Okay, you act like you don't believe me. The other Sunday morning, I was preaching at a church called Westside. And after we had finished having shout, y'all know we shouted all through communion. Willie Scales just messed us up shouting all through communion. When we got through shouting, I was shaking hands. A gentleman who was a member of our church came up to me and said, Pastor, I want to thank you, first of all, for the story you told about Osceola McCarty. He said, I want to thank you for the way you explained the scripture. He said, I've been praying all my life for somebody who has a delivery like yours, who can read and explain and help me to see. He said, the other day we were cleaning up together at the 802 campus. And he said, the elevator there was broken. You said everything with Westside's name ought to be first class. And somebody said it was going to cost about $10,000 to get it fixed. And when they said that, Pastor, you said you're going to start praying for it. He said, well, the Lord told me to tell you your prayers have been answered. Is this mic on? That somebody came up after church and gave the church $10,000 to... I might have to... Because let me tell you what God will do, and you got to be careful. There's some money the Lord gave to you, it ain't for you to spend. You're going to get that out your mind. That's not that new pair of shoes. This ain't red bottom money here. No. Get that one out your mind. This one is not for that. Let me tell you, some money God will send to you because he has somebody he's going to send your way. And God is trusting you to be a blessing. And when God shows you can be trusted with that, he'll send some more your way. Paul says that I'm going to come. Here's what I want you to do. He said it's in a specific place. Not that you take what your tithes are and give them to the Red Cross, to the Salvation Army, to the Boy Scout, because if every member did that, we wouldn't have any accountability. If every member of Westside was free to do what you wanted to with your tithes, there could be no coherent vision. What you do is you trust the vision God sets in the house because you know that God has order. And what doesn't get under that order of God doesn't get God's blessing. And the reason that we have you to bring your tithes, that's why Paul says, when I come, I'll deliver them. The reason we have you to pay them in this place is so that we can do constructive ministry together. If everybody was allowed to do what they wanted to do, we couldn't afford to pay the lights in this place. Oh, I'm preaching today. You can look at me funny. All right, now I'm out of here when I give you this one. I'm out of here when I give you this one. He said it is to be purposed. He said it is to be planned. But he said it is to be proportioned. It's in the text. I'm not making it up. He says, as the Lord has prospered you, as God has prospered you. Because here is the thing, for those folk who want to talk about grace, I'm so glad that whatever gifts you have are supplied by God. When people say Jesus didn't talk about tithing, Jesus says in Matthew that ye tithe of mint and cumin, and this ye ought to do. Now, here is the reality. Whatever gift you have is supplied by God, but you sow it back in grace. Here is the difference between tithing and grace giving. When Paul writes to these people, to these Jews who understand tithing, he understands that these are people who give proportionately. The Jews would pay 3 tithes that ended up to about 23% of their income. The reason we talk about tithing and people say grace giving, don't use grace giving as an excuse to not be fair about the tithe. Because the difference between grace and the tithe is under grace, you got to go further. Y'all ain't finna shout, but I'm gonna preach it anyway. See, under grace, you always say, I'm gonna do more. So that if under tithing, he says proportionately, here is what God does not ask you to give by how he blesses me. He does not judge my blessing by the money you make. God said, I'm asking you to give me out of what I have already given you. I'm going to be your supply, and you sow it in grace. And if under tithes it was 10% and you blow up and say, I'm on grace give, then grace goes further than the tithe. That means you start at 11 and then you start moving up. Preach, Delvin, Atchison. I am. And the truth of the matter is that when God gives you little, when God can trust you with little, he'll start to trust you with more. J.L. Kraft, who owned the Kraft Company, gave over 25% of what he made out of all the millions of dollars. He gave it to Christian organizations. And they asked him, and he said this, he said, I never would have been able to give from my millions if I wasn't able to give from my first job where I made $1.50 a week. You see, here is the truth of the matter. If you're waiting to blow up to be fair with God, if God can't trust you to give him $1 out of 10, he know he can't trust you to give him 100 out of 1,000. And you got to learn how to be fair with a little so that when God, I wish I had somebody who understand that I'm being fair with the Lord with a little, but my day is coming. I'm getting my rehearsal in. I'm learning how to give God $25 from this $250 because I got a feeling that there's a blessing in my way. And when God blesses me, I'm going to already be used to giving. Well, let me tell you the truth of the matter, and I'm out of here when I tell you all this. Whenever I go to any store, when I go to Miss Mary's, when I go to Quick Car, when I go to Lowe's, when I go on eBay, you know what I know? I know I'm paying for something that I didn't get. When I go there, when I walk into Dillard's, I know that I'm not just paying for that pair of socks, that I got to help pay on that light bill. I got to help, somebody ought to help me here. I got to help pay for that. When I walk into the lawyer's office, I know I'm helping to pay for that law degree because I want the best that they have. I know I'm helping to pay for the receptionist that talk to me. Well, here is the difference when you give to the Lord. The difference is when I give to them, I'm paying for something that I didn't get. But when I give to the Lord, I'm getting something that I didn't pay for. I can't pay him enough for what he has done for me. I can't pay him enough for him waking me up this morning. I can't pay him enough for him watching over me. I can't pay him enough for one Friday evening. Let his son die on a cross. I can't pay him enough for letting him get up early Sunday morning. I can't pay him enough for the peace that fills my soul. I can't pay him enough for watching over my children. I can't pay him enough for the joy that floods my mind. I can't pay him enough because Jesus paid it all and all.
Yes, sir. I know you right. I know you right.
I can't pay him enough.
Can't do it.
But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give because I can't be God-given. I don't need everybody, but I need about 35 people up in here to help me testify that you can't be God-given. I need some folk who tried it, who tried to outbless God. And while you're giving out of this hand, God is putting in this pocket. I wish I had somebody who knows that God can still open up the windows of heaven and pour you out blessings that you won't have room to receive. I wish I had somebody who testified that my best gifts money can't buy, because this joy that I have, money can't pay for it. This love I have, money can't pay for it. That I'm walking in victory. I thank the Lord that I got what I didn't pay for.
Amen.
And I want to challenge you to be fair with God in your giving and watch how God will bless you more than you can imagine.